Hi guys, welcome to Real Food Recovery. We have a fun topic today that I think will touch everybody listening. But first, how you doing, Jamie? Anything
Doing
exciting
fine.
happening for you?
Doing fine. Happy to be here.
Good. So we're going to dive into something that many of us have experienced but rarely talk about, and that's the dangers of the diet mentality, especially when you're on the path of recovering from ultra-processed food addiction or simply the effects of ultra-processed food. The diet culture is everywhere, and it's so ingrained in our lives that we may not even realize how it's affecting us. But for anyone who's been caught in this cycle of the ultra processed foods, the diet mentality can be a huge obstacle to true healing. So let's break it down and learn how we can free ourselves from that.
I agree. So, what exactly is the diet mentality? It's the belief that we need to constantly restrict, control, and monitor our food intake to be healthy or to reach an ideal body weight. It tells us that certain foods are good and others are bad, and it often leads to a toxic cycle of guilt, shame, and binging.
Yeah, I agree with that. And for anyone recovering from ultra processed food addiction, this mindset can be especially dangerous. You might ask why? Well, because it keeps us locked in that battle with food when we actually need to heal our relationship with food. I don't know if this will surprise you, but statistics will show that 49.1% of adults, US adults, have tried to lose weight in the past 12 months, and roughly 90% of those people will regain the weight.
Yes, that's not surprising. Think about it when you're stuck in the diet mentality, you're always either on a diet or off a diet with no in between. This constant
Mhm.
swinging between extremes leaves you disconnected from your body's natural hunger and fullness cues. And for those of us who relied on ultra processed foods for comfort or stress or even out of habit, this disconnection can feel like the very thing that's keeping us trapped.
I agree. And as we mentioned, that diet mentality is an approach to eating that is short term and focused on just, I'm doing air quotes, weight loss. I wish we could do a raise of hands for those that are listening by asking who this sounds familiar to, but I will focus on Jamie since she is the only one here with me and talking back. So, do you want to share how many diets you've been on and how long they've lasted, what the outcomes have been?
Yeah, I mean, just all my life, right? So ever since I was a kid, when my mom dragged me to Weight Watchers and all that stuff. So I did all the things, tried all the diets,
Mhm.
all the I don't know about the fad diets. I wasn't so much into the fad diets. I was more into the I'm too practical for the fad diets, but I'm more, like cabbage soup and all that stuff that seems silly to me. Um, and if it was a fad diet, I would wait a very long time until the confirmation came out that scientific confirmation that things were safe to do.
Mhm.
And then I would go down that road of what maybe was at one time considered a fad and now is something that I feel like is scientifically backed. But yeah, either way, it was still diets.
Yeah, I'm your story and my story are much the same because once I got into puberty, it was nothing but, oh wow, these curves are not as in as my figure used to be. And so it was a constant um, diet. But and until I got into recovery, the only focus was on losing weight, and the only thing I cared about is the number on the scale, and it would tell me if I was a good girl or a bad girl and needed to torture myself some more to get these results, that I needed to feel, doing air quotes again, feel happy, because the only way to be happy was measured by the number on the scale, right? It sounds like a fun life. The
Yeah.
problem was at the time, I really didn't know about addiction or recovery. That was not even in a vernacular that I'd heard anybody talk about. I just thought all these skinny girls had way more willpower or better genetics than me because they seemed to be happy and thriving on the outside. But sadly, the restriction never lasted. But that depression sure knew how to stick around when I couldn't stick to this ridiculous plan of eating only grapefruit, tuna, and beets. It was, I remember that diet. Have you heard of the one? It's for 3 days and you get a Dairy Queen, a small Dairy Queen ice cream cone at the end of each night. It's grapefruit,
Right.
yeah, and eggs and beets and a can of green beans. So I just want to talk a little bit more about how this shows up in our life, because when I say torture, it really is torture. And Jamie, do you feel like you were battling that fear, that panic, that pain when you were caught in this diet cycle, or were you having the time of your life?
No, I really wasn't. I didn't fall into those diets because I just felt like they were useless. So um, I I kind of just gave up on it for a long time and never really let myself get into the that cycle of dieting, of any of the trying the new fad. I just because I was always overweight, so for me it was like just this is what I am. So I would try to cut back on the foods that I was eating, and then there were times when I didn't care. So I had a different, not certainly not better, but a different mentality about it, just because it was something that I had always struggled with since I was an infant. Like I was always overweight. So, and now doctors are telling me, well, you were always hypothyroid. Nobody ever diagnosed it. So,
Oh,
you should have been, on thyroid medication as a child, and you
oh
wouldn't
wow.
have struggled the way that you struggled.
Wow.
And again, that's where the medical establishment was in the 70s and 80s. They weren't there yet. So they laugh. They're like, it's so clear that you had way too much brake and not enough gas in your system. So anything that I would eat, right, even um, cutting whatever portions I normally had in half, I would still keep the weight on. It was just like a losing battle, and I felt that, so I just didn't even try.
Well, I'm going to tell an embarrassing story, but I think this is one that we probably, a lot of us can identify with. And I remember when I was still in my early 20s and I wanted to lose, I was having babies through all my 20s and I wanted to lose those last 5 pounds that would not come off, thinking I can, after 3 babies, I can get back to how I was before. So I decided I was just going to eat this egg sandwich for breakfast and then not eat anything the rest of the day until that weight came off. Well, yes, the weight started coming off. And by the fifth morning, when I woke up, I literally was so weak. My legs would not hold me up,
Mhm.
standing up straight. And I've mentioned this before that I suffer from hypoglycemia, but my husband had to call my mom to come over and take care of me and my baby because he had to go to work. It was so scary. It really was frightening to think, I can't stand. I can barely stand. I didn't have enough strength. And this is the part that's super insane, that's really embarrassing. I told my mom I needed a piece of toast so I could continue living. And I said, but first, I need you to help me to get to the scale because I want to weigh myself to see if I had dropped some more weight so I could be, again, air quotes, happy about my progress. And this is a prime example of what it looks like to do these diets to the exclusion of health. And for some reason, I thought if I can just get that weight off, it'll stay off and then, I'll just maintain it. It's insanity.
Yeah.
It's pure insanity. Do you feel like you ever went to extremes to the exclusion of your health? Did you ever have
Oh yeah.
that girl
Yeah.
experience?
Again, just because for me it didn't come until much later, until I was in my 20s and late 20s, early 30s. I definitely I guess I was in my late 20s. I took diet pills for a little while, mid 20s, I guess. Took diet pills for about a year. And of course I lost weight and, then gained it right back. After I stopped the pills because I knew the pills inherently were not good for me. And then I ended up once I lost all of gosh, 200 plus pounds, I really became obsessed with kind of getting my body into a shape that I thought was acceptable for society. I'd never been there before. I'd never had a normal body. So whatever that means. So I decided to, in my disordered thinking and disordered, relationship with food, thought it would be a good idea to do a fitness competition that would get me in this, best shape of my life. And I was, walking around at at 16, 17% body fat. And, but to get there was extremely, I had to be extremely strict, measure and count every single thing, including cucumbers and vegetables and the amount of water that I drank. And to make different cuts of weight, I would
Yeah.
use laxatives before my weigh-ins. I mean, yeah, it was like stuff that wrestlers and boxers did. Um, and it was not healthy at all. It was not sane at all. It was merely focused on the numbers on a scale, the numbers on calipers. That was it.
Yeah.
That was what ruled me, and it's very sad, such a waste.
Yeah, I will just share one sentence, one more story, but I remember you mentioned taking diet pills. I took a laxative once thinking, okay, well, this will work. I've heard some girls talking about that. Well, that was on a Saturday. The next morning was Sunday. I was at church. I had to run to the bathroom because I was about to poop my pants.
Mhm.
So, that kicked in. I'd never done that before. Dummy, 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 dummy. So yeah, these extremes, it hurts me to hear the things that we do in these extremes just to be thin, and we're just going about it in a backwards way when Jamie and I figured out a really healing, peaceful system that doesn't have any of these other side effects. So
Yeah,
as you can see, we've had the typical experience with diets that you hear others sharing about, and at times we have really abused our bodies, or at least I am speaking for myself. I know I have. And as a side note, this ties into one of the reasons that we also have brought up the subject of the GLP-1s when people are using them
yes,
strictly for weight loss, because we know that you lose muscle with this drug along with fat. And for those of you who don't realize it, your heart is a muscle as well. So
great.
that affects our cardiovascular system. And
Your
that's one
heart
of the
shrinks.
systems.
Your heart shrinks on these
Yeah,
drugs. It's been proven.
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Very
So that's one of the areas that we do not want to mess around with. Our heart's kind of important. So um, we know that yes, the GLP-1s do reduce the mental chatter, but unfortunately, a lot of people just eat less of the processed food. So when that happens, you still are using those processed foods, which are harmful to your body. And yes, you can get away with it because of appetite suppression. And yes, the scale does go down, but like I said, you just still have that problem of consuming the processed foods and all the dangers that it invites into your health. Plus, when you go off, the mental chatter returns and you've not developed these skills and you're right back where you were. But and then you're suffering that depression that I talked about a little earlier of the weight coming right back on. That's the worst. That is just the worst spot to be in. So basically, when you are all done and you go back to your old ways, you're going to start getting those old results again. I know someone who was on it. They lost all their weight. They looked fantastic. So they cut back to a maintenance dose. And guess what? That mental chatter, or she didn't really say the mental chatter as much as just the appetite suppression was gone. And now she's having to white knuckle it to keep the weight off. And I have to wonder how long that will last before the weight starts coming back.
Oh, yeah. Well, you don't learn any other if you don't learn any other tools, then you don't have any other tools to lean on. I've
Mm-mm.
heard from a friend of mine. She's actually I don't want to say who she is in my life because she sometimes listens, but a friend of mine was talking to me about her experience with them. She's lost a significant amount of weight, and she's had a health journey through cancer actually, and very,
Mm.
very young. And so she gained a bunch after her cancer treatment, and she wanted to lose it. And she's typical in this sort of 20s, 30s, that mindset of I can eat just less, whatever I want, just less. And so I'm eating half a box of nerds instead of a whole box. I'm eating half a smoothie instead of a whole one. And I'm like, where are the nutrients here? So she talked about the severe issues with her stomach now, where when she goes up in dose, depending on where she is in her dosing, when they go up in dose, she will have such severe stomach pain whenever she eats that, I mean, it will double her over. She's missed work. She's and I've seen it, I've experienced it in the sense of, watching her kind of devolve and not knowing what was going on. And that's what's been going on. And she said that it will feel like somebody stabbing her in her stomach. And I'm like,
Ah.
"Wha-" She's like, but I've got to get down to 145. And I thought, I mean, I don't judge because I get it, but I
Me
get her
too.
thinking, right? Because I lived it, but I
Totally.
don't, nothing, no amount of pain like that would be worth anything. And then I did go online to read about some of these things after I heard on a Joe Rogan podcast about the heart muscle shrinking, right? You're losing muscle mass everywhere, including your heart. So there's permanent, irreversible, and some of these long-term patients, there's permanent, irreversible heart damage, right? Same thing as with the fen craze back in the 80s.
That's right.
Um, and so you've got heart muscle damage. Um, and then these people now are saying, I was on a Reddit thread with people who had tried the name brand and the compounded versions of these GLPs, right? So they're from compound pharmacies, not necessarily name brand drugs. And both groups were saying that they have experienced stomach paralysis.
Oh gosh. That well, so first of all, that can kill you when your bowels become paralyzed, that can kill you. And the other
Totally.
thing I want to mention about when your heart shrinks, I think it was Karen Carpenter that was the famous anorexic that died
Anorexia.
from that. The problem is when your heart shrinks and then you gain all this weight back, you are
Yeah.
trying to sustain life off a smaller muscle, and the muscle can't keep up with the weight gain. So that's the problem with the heart shrinkage.
Mhm. Yep. Oh yeah. It's just, and when I read the stories that people were saying about the stomach paralysis and that they'd been off the drug for a while, and one of the stories I read, now granted everyone's different, yada yada, but she had only been on low doses, and she said that her stomach literally could not move the food through. So it was beyond, the typical side effects. She's like, I am sure. She said it's been months since she took it, and she said her stomach's never been the same.
Oh, kills me because we've discovered an approach that just you can still be happy and comfortable and have your peace of mind. I just hate to hear about people suffering like this. It kills me.
Delays gastric emptying. That's the
Yeah.
phrase that I keep thinking about, that the pharmaceutical companies said that these drugs do. Delays gastric emptying. For how long,
Yeah.
and what's, we've talked about like what really sits in your stomach, and do you want that sitting in your stomach? I didn't think about the fact that potentially you could have patients whose gastric emptying is never back to normal,
Yeah.
depending on how long they've been on these drugs. That's petrifying.
Oh, yeah, it will kill you. I mean, yeah, you will have problems forever. So peristalsis is what's called where the intestines just wait, like at a football game where people are doing the wave around the stadium. That's what goes on. That's how it passes your food through. And if ain't nobody doing the wave, you've got stuff that will sit there and cause all kinds of ischemia to your intestines and they'll die. So you don't want to be in that situation. Anyway, okay. So getting back to the topic, I appreciate you bringing that up because it makes me think about, for me, one of my biggest problems with that diet mentality was the anxiety, and I think the mental chatter was just as bad as when I was on a diet or when I wasn't, because but once I found recovery and started tapping into peace and calm, this whole new world opened up for me. I found out I could calm myself when I was anxious versus using food for comfort. And
Mhm.
guess what? It worked and felt so much better and lasted versus when I used the food for comfort, because food only exacerbated the problem that I was having. So talking to myself with this calm, nurturing, loving parent tone of a loving parent, it does wonders to immediately pull that blood flow back to the frontal lobe. it's this reassurance, everything's okay and you are safe. And for me, when I can tap into that emotional stability, I can easily stick to that recovery plan even when I'm surrounded by sugar at every event, everywhere I turn, every holiday, every gathering, driving down the street, every person's house I'm in. I
Mm.
remember being on yet another diet. I think it was LA weight loss, but the local pizza place was having this big sale going on every Friday night during the fall. And my sneaky addiction is like, oh, well, I'll just go pick up pizzas for the kids on Friday night so I won't have to make dinner before we all went to the high school football game. Well, once I got that sucker in the car, I was three pieces deep before I ever even got home. And then the negotiations would start. How was I going to restrict the next day? How am I going to get right back on plan? I think that went on for the entire football season. And what I come to realize over and over again, restriction just does not work and it will never work. So I'm just so grateful for the recovery plan that Jamie and I developed with our 16 branches of recovery that serves as this wonderful dopamine drip throughout the day of these feel good moments as we pass the hours away versus living, just white knuckling it from hit to hit and just being in a panic to hurry up and get these results. I really dial in heavily to my clean food, my sleep, my movement, and I start my day with this spiritual practice every morning. It makes me feel like I'm standing on solid ground. So for me, I measure success by that inner peace that I feel. And I quit weighing myself several years ago, which only increased my inner peace. Do you want to share how you measure your success?
Yeah, and I right now I have to weigh myself because of other things that I'm working on and meds that I'm on. So that's something that I've had to do probably for the last 6 months. And so I'm back, but I do it once a week just to, again, be able to see where I am and report back to the doctor. And that helps me uh, track some things. But before that, it was a very long time, probably years that I'd had since I'd weighed myself, and I just used clothing to make sure that still, I still was on track,
Yeah.
or pictures. Um,
Mhm.
and I also, again, just other habits that help me stay on track is, always food prep, and I measure success, making sure that I'm doing my food prep and staying on track with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you completely. And hopefully, we've convinced you that the diet mentality and the holistic approach are in contradiction to one another. If you don't focus on this bigger picture, you are never going to leave that diet mentality, and that mental chatter remains alive, along with the insanity that it invites and continues to flare up here and there. You know, you are stuck in that diet mentality if it's a holiday or if it's Friday or if it's your birthday, and you're telling yourself, I can just have a little bit of this or that, and then I'll go back to what I actually know is best for me when things aren't quite so tempting. A holistic approach is scheduling an activity to do on those occasions that are not focused around food, but on connection and fulfillment. Maybe taking a walk with a friend, doing a painting class, getting your nails done, or bringing games to do at a family gathering where food is not the main focus. I think you can feel it in your chest when what you are looking for on those special occasions when it I think you can tell when it's the food you're really seeking or the connection
It's
you're seeking. Can't you tell when
hard.
you are more in that diet mentality versus the big picture? And it's because it's hard. It takes effort to not slip back into those feelings.
If I'm making any kind of bargains with myself, it's pretty much an
Yes.
indication that I'm back in it. Any kind
Yep.
of bargains, any kind of, if I'm deviating from, if I'm scheming, planning, any of those things, that's pretty
Yeah.
much my indication.
No, I agree with that. I've actually found that freedom comes when you give up processed food altogether. You are more able to be present to the awe of just being alive. And then there's no discussion left, and you are able to connect to your higher power as a companion through the tough spots and keep your peace through the process. And it continues to get easier as we continue to practice because we do have to practice. It is still hard, even to this day. I mean, it's not hard, but I have to be aware, and it is a practice every day. You have to become committed and draw a firm boundary. about how we want to live. It's all about peace for me, and I think Jamie too. And we know that the diet mentality leads us further away from peace. There's literally not one thing that is peaceful about a diet. And by the way, doing deep emotional work has nothing to do with the diet mentality. Emotional work is for people who want a lifestyle. Then you can leave behind the will, I won't, I will, I won't, I should, I shouldn't, I. And if you're in the diet mentality, you can't hear the deep emotional self with that chatter going on. You just
Yeah.
can't hear it. For example, if you are on a diet when the pumpkin pie comes around on Thanksgiving, you say, no, thank you, I'm on a diet, versus being someone with an identity shift of I don't eat sugar and I want to feel better later. So the diet mentality has that expiration date, meaning you can go back to those old patterns. And as we've mentioned, the diet mentality is done in a rush, measured by the scale, and only successful if weight is flying off. So that's the irony too on the diet mentality. If the weight's coming off slow, it's a failure. So it has to be coming off quickly for in order to feel really good about it. And if you have made a change in who you are by living a healthier life, you might not even be tempted to use the scale because those numbers don't matter. If you are doing the best you can, then there is just nothing more to do.
Mhm. Another big point we want to bring up in the diet mentality language is if I've been good or I've been bad, right? This whole idea of black or white. For people that
Mm-hmm.
want to change their life or are working on the holistic approach, it might sound something like I've been having more food thoughts lately and feeling a little wobbly. I need to double down on my branches of recovery, right? So that's what recovery sounds like. Um, or noticing that you're letting things slip. And again, getting back into those behaviors, right? Journaling, walking, going back into meetings, getting connected in nature, connecting with others. The diet mentality focuses solely on how you're doing with the food you eat and how many calories you're consuming, which is like only a small part of the whole recovery world, which is why Paige and I chose real food recovery
Yeah.
for the name of our podcast and community because it is about recovery. It's not just about food.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes down to identity and who you are at the core, right? At your core. So again, it's just it it's well said. I don't need to add anything.
Yeah. I know people have come to us wanting to know right off the bat, okay, what's the food plan at Real Food Recovery? Even if we are talking about our program and how we heal the brain, they want to go, okay, but what's the food plan? But I, diet mentality is about a food plan. Healing is about the brain and the support you receive. So the diet mentality misses that inner peace part of the
Mm.
system and has little about the food. Sadly, the diet mentality can last for decades. I know that's true from personal experience, and you only gain more weight as the years go by. So there's the big one
That's
liner, right? That is that stay in the diet mentality, sure, but you're going to just continue to gain more and more weight. Health is about curiosity about the whole system and where we can make changes within ourselves. The diet mentality thinks the system is the food plan. How many people buy this book about being a healthier person and they skip right to the food plan and that's all they care about? So at Real Food Recovery, we don't have a food plan. We just promote single ingredient, whole, non-processed foods.
it really, guys, it really takes care of itself. If you just eat those single ingredient
Yes.
processed foods, it really takes care of itself.
Yes. Yes.
It
Definitely.
truly, your body knows when it's full, it knows when it's hungry. And when you zero in on those, if you do have cravings, which again, if you're eating single processed, unprocessed single ingredient foods, you really don't get many cravings,
Mm-hmm.
unless
Manageable.
you're just eating, dates all day or drinking syrup all day, right? Which I get, but that's processed, right? Again, we don't recommend either of those things. So keep in mind, right, just because it's a single ingredient food, if that's all you ate, your body's going to be craving other nutrients and you're going to get
Right.
cravings. But I noticed for me when I'm eating more single ingredient whole foods like, animal protein, I and vegetables, I don't really get cravings. And as soon as I add in anything else that's outside of those two things, I will get cravings.
Mm,
And they're not like, I'm not craving candy or junk food. I'm craving probably more nutrient dense foods.
mhm.
So if I have to fill up on, for me, on protein and veggies. And then if I have room for anything else, I might have a bite of a starch, or a bite of some kind of single ingredient whole food starch. But even then, I'm very careful.
Mhm.
All right. So how do we break free from the diet mentality while still working on recovery? It starts with shifting your mindset and rebuilding trust with your body. Here are some steps to help you get there. Number one, release the idea that recovery is about weight loss. The scale has nothing to do with progress. It's just a measure of gravity. If you focus
Mhm.
strictly on your recovery, your body will find its natural rhythm and will find what is sustainable for long-term enjoyable life, and do so in a peaceful way.
Agree. Also, listen to your body. This is one of the hardest things to do when you've been out of touch with your hunger and fullness cues, but it's essential. So practicing mindful eating works when we're consuming the foods that our bodies were engineered to consume. The single ingredient, non-processed whole foods. Those allow the messages and signals to provide the appropriate feedback of when we are full. Processed foods shuts off the, in air quotes, I've had enough signals, and drives you to eat more. So part of learning to trust ourselves starts with choosing the appropriate fueling for the appropriate way that our bodies were engineered.
Work on self-compassion. Recovery is not linear, and you're going to have setbacks. That's just the reality of anything in life. The diet mentality thrives on all or nothing thinking, but recovery is about progress, not perfection. Be kind to yourself during the process.
Agree. And lastly, focus on nourishment over restriction. Instead of thinking about what you shouldn't have, focus on adding more nourishing whole foods to your diet. Think about how these foods make you feel. Do they give you energy? Do they make you feel strong? When you focus on nourishing your body, it shifts the focus away from deprivation and towards abundance. And we like to think of it as abundance versus abstinence.
Yep. All right, so something to keep in mind as we wrap up. Health goals you have to have patience with them. This is not a fast-paced situation.
Mhm.
So again, stay the course and focus on all your non-scale victories and the recovery process, and enjoy that mental transformation, the spiritual transformation that comes with recovery. Nothing that lasts is a quick fix. Uh,
Mhm.
and come for the vanity and stay for the sanity, is a phrase in the 12-step world. Um, but yeah, I really, it truly is about recovering your life, not just weight.
Yeah. So you might ask yourself, what can I do to help myself overcome the diet mentality? Why am I doing this? Come up with reasons that have nothing to do with weight. What do you want your life to mean? Breaking free from the diet mentality isn't easy, especially in a world that constantly pushes it on us, but it's absolutely possible. And more than that, it's necessary for true recovery. Remember, recovery is about more than just the food you eat. It's about healing your relationship with that food and learning to trust your body again and finding that peace with food.
Yeah, I hope this episode helps shed some light on how the diet mentality can hold us back from true healing and give you the tools to start breaking free from it. Keep being kind to yourself on this journey, and remember, you're not alone. We're here to offer support. So let's jump into a couple listener questions. The first one is, I really want to be in the headspace of thinking of recovery as freedom, but how do I get to that place when I feel like I'm missing out on what everyone else is doing around me? Looks like they're having so much fun. So that's marketing. That's not reality. Everyone, I laugh at the commercials if I happen to see the commercials, which is rare because I don't really sit down and watch TV like that. And if I do, I'm not watching stuff that has commercials. And if I am, it's short-lived. So if I see a commercial for some kind of fast food, junk food, or processed food, I laugh when I see the commercials and people are having fun and they're all fit and skinny and
Hmm.
drinking their Coca-Cola and eating their
Hmm.
fast food. I laugh, and I just think that is such a crock that they've sold for so long. They've also, just like the cigarette marketers have, sold confusion.
Yeah.
Companies, food marketers sell confusion because
Hmm.
you're watching that commercial and inside you're knowing that you can't drink that product or eat that product and look that way. But
Right.
yet you see other people doing it. So they're playing with your mirror neurons and you think, well, I can do that. And
Hmm.
if I drink that or eat that, I'll have that kind of fun, have that kind of life. And it's just not true. It's absolutely not true. It is a lie.
Hmm.
I don't care who you are. And also, it maybe you're 12 years old and you're constantly active and in sports and have a young metabolism and there's a time period that you can do that. I would say that parents are also doing a really bad and big injustice to their children to give them those foods because there will be a time later in life where they cannot have those foods without some kind of negative health consequence. So again, love your family. It's not punishment, and it certainly isn't a lack of fun to not have those foods. It's actually just freedom.
Yeah. Right. But I understand how it can look like fun. I mean, I get it. I've fallen into that trap too. So I get it. Yeah, great answer. The last one, the next one, last one is how do you balance the need for progress with the need to be patient and kind to yourself? What I'm saying is that I am a failure at diets like everyone else, and sometimes I feel like a failure at recovery too. I want to be perfect or at least feel like I am making progress at my goals, but I feel like I am a constant letdown to myself. So I get that. We understand that. And the problem is the addiction voice can be so loud when we are being hard on ourselves. So to start off, you are human and no one is perfect on this journey. So start with that as your baseline. And sometimes it's hard to see progress with this myopic view, that up close view. If you step back further and look at the big picture, I bet you will be able to see progress when you look at months or years versus days, hours, week, because remember we were talking about the diet mentality is in a rush and measuring progress on this daily basis and sets us up for anxiety and recovery. In recovery is the long haul journey. The diet mentality is weighing yourself every day, and that's the only way we measure progress. So helicopter up and look at yourself from that perspective. I bet you are doing a little bit better than you think. And as I always say, there's only one rule in recovery, and that is don't give up. And lastly, no one has ever hated themselves into recovery. So being kind with slip ups will get you further than punishment, and it gives you the motivation to keep trying. Jamie, I didn't know if you had any perspective that I might have missed on this one because I thought it was such a good question. So
Yep.
yeah, just it's you're doing okay. If you're not giving up, you're doing okay and being kind to yourself and just seeking more and more information, immersing yourself with supportive people also helps, which is what we specialize here at Real Food Recovery. And if you want to know more about us, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U, and we hope to see you there. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jamie. Bye.
Take care.